probably don't even know what a classical concert is.
Yeah, well, you can explain it to them yourself.
Oh boy, this film is talking to me. This is gonna be fun. Grand Piano is a film from 2013 telling the story of a pianist being threatened by a sniper during a concert who will kill him if he plays a wrong note. How accurate is the orchestra portrayed, and how real could a shooting be at an orchestra concert? Today I'm going to look at the musical accuracy of the movie Grand Piano, but I'll also share how the threat of being shot on stage can actually be a real thing. Before the movie begins, we hear the orchestra tuning. Is it another case of Tenet? No! Thankfully they are tuning to the proper note. If you really want me to get nitpicky, it's that the entire ensemble is tuning at the same time rather than in sections, and that the musicians are playing more than just their tuning note, which isn't unheard of, but if this was for a concert, it wouldn't really happen. Why? Why must we have that damn tap? It's unrealistic and does not happen in the professional setting.
Tom wants to go straight to the theater.
Well, what happened to pre-gaming?
It's a classical concert, Ash. So that means it's better if Tom is not drunk?
Actually, you'd be surprised by the amount of musicians I know that have had a drink or two before a concert. There's a few examples floating around online of extreme cases, but I'm not sure of the accuracy of the information. During his phone interview in the limo, we hear a few questions that are very odd.
Your return to the stage after all these years of silence. Are you nervous about choking again? Do you see this as your last chance at a glorious redemption?
I'd be surprised if any interviewer would word questions this way. This really gives the impression and expectation that he is going to fail, or choke, as they say. While it is very normal for musicians to downplay their performance to colleagues behind the scenes, a practice we should really stop, and I'll get into it more in a minute, this would not play out this way from a press interview. The questions would be guided more as an excitement. Are you excited to be back playing on stage? Are you looking forward to playing on Patrick Audereau's piano again? His nervousness was already played up with the conversation with his wife and what happened on the plane at the beginning. We don't need it here, especially since this conversation is quite a bit out of place. They arrive at the hall and the limo driver is dropping him off at the front door. Musicians would use the stage entrance, or the back door as it's being called here.
Sir, do you think you can pull it around to the back door?
There are the rare venues where musicians do enter from the same place as the audience, as I've played with 2 such groups, but when there is the option of a stage door, that one is used. When Tom reaches backstage, he is greeted by other musicians and stagehands. Generally speaking, this is accurate, although wording is strange due to them wanting that increased tension of his past experience. For the most part, musicians are highly encouraging of each other, and someone coming back after a long hiatus would be welcomed with praise, and no one would make the
Tom, you're alive!
comment after what he had been through. This final bit here is the most accurate from anyone offering more than a 3 to 5 word greeting.
Frank, you're gonna take first part tonight. Carl's sick. Not a problem, right?
Okay, we have a comment to a tubist that he will need to take first part because someone is sick. The majority of the time there is a tuba part, there's only one. With today's norm, we all have each other's cell numbers, so the tubist would actually have known this already. And if someone was out sick, they'd hire a replacement, as we actually see 2 tubas later. For some real-world examples, I was called 30 minutes before a show because one of the players was in a car accident. And I was called the morning of a show to play because one of the players was sick. Anyway, that comment to the tubist is a little bit ridiculous. This scene with Tom and Norman is pretty realistic, as I mentioned earlier about how musicians can be. We tend to be very down on ourselves, pointing out the flaws everyone knows and then some. This comment from Norman is a little silly, but actually accurate.
If you're gonna play music this dense, you're gonna hit a wrong note, and they won't know. They never do.
The audience is there to hear great music, and the musicians are there to create great music. No one cares if you accidentally play a wrong note, it happens.
Unless you're gonna start playing carefully, in which case I'll just go get the wine and cheese.
I don't need respectable.
Norman's comment about playing careful is also very true. This is why live concerts are usually more exciting than a recording, because you get a more raw emotional response from the collective musicians on stage. So let's talk about the time, and we'll come back to this. This time could make sense if it was after intermission, but it isn't because of people still entering and a scene later when Tom runs to the basement to save the lost and cut score. And while I'm at it, I should address the potential error that some would point out, and that is a soloist not being there for any rehearsals. It does happen where the soloist comes in just for the concert. As a matter of fact, it happened where a soloist came in to play one concerto, but the orchestra had prepared a different one, and the pianist found out on stage during the concert. Being a badass pro, she had the other concerto memorized as well.
And she told me I was expecting to play a completely different piece. I do what I can do if I remember. And the miracle is that she has such a memory that she could, within a minute, switch to a new concerto without making one mistake.
Another potential error that people would point out is the fact that the concerto performed is cut into two. We do the first two movements, then they break for intermission, then we do the third, and then we have the finale of La Cinquette. This actually does happen on rare occasions. One performance of Mahler 3 that I attended, they took an intermission after the first movement. So not really a mistake here, although I will admit it is kind of odd. Right before the concert begins, we get another time check, and it's 9:21. This is an incredibly late concert. Personally, I have not heard of concerts starting later than 8 p.m. So now we have the concert starting, and the conductor is brought on stage, and the orchestra tunes. No. The conductor comes out after the orchestra tunes. Typically, the conductor walks out, bows, and the concert starts, with sometimes them saying a few words. It's possible for music to be left backstage, and stagehands would help out and bring it up like this if they happen to notice. They're nice people and just as much as the production as the musicians. Seriously, shout out to all the tech and stage folks. Thank you for all that you do. Alright, back to the movie.
The whole place is packed.
He mentions it's a packed house, but we just saw a handful of empty seats a few moments ago. This whole scene before Tom walks out has a realistic tuning sequence happening, so points for that. We also get to see the title, Slave Morality, on the piano concerto we are about to hear. I wonder if that has anything to do with what happens between Tom and Clem. His entrance on stage is both realistic and not at the same time. Given what they have played up so far, his unenthusiastic entrance makes sense. But even when having a bad day, in the end, you're performing, and musicians will look very happy on stage. This isn't universally true because we do forget that we are performing whenever we're on stage. I would actually support an acting class for musicians. For those that don't know, what he's doing here is adjusting the bench's height, and I've actually not witnessed pianists wiping off the keys like this, but I guess it could happen. As you would guess, the notes we see Elijah playing are not correct with what we hear, so I won't stop at every scene to point it out. I will give him credit though, spending 3 hours a day for 3 weeks preparing for the shoot, brushing off his piano skills from when he was a kid and took lessons.
I'd played when I was younger, I took lessons when I was a kid, but I stopped when I was 14 or 15 and haven't played since.
I had about 3 weeks prior to going to Barcelona to work with the material, and it was in that time that I took lessons, but I mean it was like 3 hours a day, super intensive.
His playing, while not accurate, is actually a lot closer than what you would normally see in movies. I'd love to hear a pianist's perspective on this though. Once the orchestra comes in, Tom looks at his hands. Why? It's as if he is in amazement about what he can do, but he is fully aware of his abilities. This is the exact same reaction in Star Trek Deep Space Nine when Odo looks at his hands because he's amazed at what his hands can do at the piano, except he wasn't actually playing, per that story.
I don't play the piano.
Let's take a break and talk about the instrumentation on stage. We actually do have 2 tubas, so hey, that comment earlier made sense. And as you see, they hired a replacement as well, but there are only 3 horns instead of 4 and no other brass. That's very odd, but not technically incorrect since this is not a real piece they were playing that I could check the instrumentation with. We do have double winds, which is the standard as well, so really it's just the missing trumpets and trombones that's a little odd here, which by the way, there's trumpets in the music. I should mention there are trombones in there as well, although I don't have a specific example that you can really hear them, except here when the musicians are warming up. They are listed in the credits though, and funny enough, new tubas are listed. You'll notice I don't mention the musicians on stage for any errors, and that's because they're real musicians. They had a click track and score playing on a loudspeaker for shooting these scenes.
There's a PA, which is playing mainly for the musicians. So when the musicians are hearing the PA and they're playing along with the PA.
The shot here has the conductor beating in 3, which is correct, but unfortunately the editing makes him offbeat. It's not the only time the editing is off. This wide shot when there's only piano playing and the orchestra looks like they are. Next we get a shot of the orchestra in the dark. Yeah, cool lighting effect, but how are the musicians going to see the music? For shows that have lighting effects going on, there would be stand lights. Here the musicians are in the dark, so minus a point there. So skipping over the obviously non-realistic parts of the soloist getting up and down and leaving the stage, we come to the conclusion of the first movement of Uranosyan's Fourth Piano Concerto, a fictional concerto.
I know that it's not customary to speak between movements, but...
Alright, since he points it out, I'll let it go. Starting the second movement, the phone's time is 9:43, but we just saw that it was 9:53 in his dressing room. Based on the soundtrack to the movie, that first movement is about 11 minutes long, so this 9:43 time actually makes sense. This phone call I can actually believe more than you think. These two have been established that they don't know what a classical concert is, so I believe that they would disregard the request to turn off their phones. The conductor also would not react either. Actually, here's a few stories that I can tell you based on concert interruptions. A musician on stage in the middle of the piece collapsed, and the conductor stopped the performance, made sure the individual was okay before continuing. That person was fine, by the way. In another performance, an audience member had a heart attack, but we kept the performance going. Sadly, this person did die. So there's two extreme examples of real concert interruptions that make this scene believable. But back to the movie.
Shh, I'm trying to listen to the music.
I'll give this scene a pass. It's definitely rude to be talking or on your phone during a performance, just like in a movie theater. Moving forward a little bit, did we just add a third tuba somehow? Next, I want to look at the two quotes.
Stravinsky beat his own children. Mozart was a drunk.
Both of these are most likely false. There's a handful of evidence about how the drunken Mozart of the movie Amadeus is not actually true. As for the Stravinsky beating his kids, I can't find any evidence of that. Elijah plays close enough for me on most of this La Cinquette piece, but the further along it goes, the more inaccurate it gets. This note here, I have no idea why he's playing an E flat against the D that we hear. This is also a note that is playable on a standard piano. So I guess I should address this customized 8-octave piano.
One of the things that the Bosendorfer 290 Imperial Grand Piano is very famous for is its 9 extra keys down here at the bass end of the piano.
This is the new Stewart & Sons piano that was made last year. It has 108 keys, so 9 octaves. Conventional pianos go to here, and we have the extra notes. And of course, the bass is just really very, very deep, very full.
So what was the big deal about this customized piano? At the beginning, I alluded to the threat of being shot as a real thing. It was true for one orchestra I know of. There was a shooting threat to the group. Security was raised for the concert and all the musicians on stage were on edge. Thankfully, nothing came of the threat, but no one was actually caught for making the threat either. So it's hard to say how real this actually was, but for the musicians on stage, it was very real and very scary. The final note I want to make about the movie are the comments around Tom's ability and his unplayable piece. First, Tom is said to be one of the few pianists with a wide enough span that rivals Rachmaninoff, known for his wide span and difficult works because of that.
Who can move their fingers that fast and spread them that wide?
Elijah Wood is not a big guy. He's 5'6", and his hands do not look like they can span as much as Rachmaninoff. My personal opinion is that they should have left off those comments and just left it at him being a prodigy pianist who is able to play fast and accurately. I actually quite enjoyed Grand Piano. I truly feel that they were pretty accurate with many aspects of the performance, with only a few things that I think should have been adjusted, like the timer on the concert, some of the dialogue regarding the stage fright and past experiences of Tom, and they really should have made a big deal about an 8-octave piano. Those are, of course, my thoughts on Grand Piano. What did you think of the movie? Is there another movie or TV show with an orchestral element that I should take a look at next? Let me know, and if you'd like to support me and my work, there's a link to buy me a drink in the description below, and with that, I will see you in the next video.